The Christ impulse is the unseen but felt force that gives our species the drive to discover the unknown and to recognize ourselves in each other, as well as perceive and correct the wrongs in the world. While the idea of the Christ has been with humanity for thousands of years before the crucifixion of Jesus, or Yeshua ben Yosef, as Rudolf Steiner suggested, it wasn't until the crucifixion at Golgotha that human beings began to, en masse, recognize that their inner world in some way reflects their outer world. In this video, we're going to look at what that means psychologically, how it ties in with emerging scientific concepts, and what the phrase, "not I, but Christ in me," really means. Golgotha was the event of the one known as Jesus performing an ancient rite of rebirthing the solar impulse in the body. The idea is that he was a magician that was very adept in his time, and he had an understanding of the world in a way that he saw links where there weren't any seemingly noticeable links. Through much study and synchronicities, he began to understand the world around him was awash in a sort of spiritual fluid. Or, as it's been recorded in the Bible, Jesus said that you could find God's kingdom, quote, not in a way you will be able to see with your eyes. People will not say, "Look, here it is," or "there it is," because God's kingdom is within you. Jesus was able to quickly realize that he was able to embody many of the principles he had discovered, and he took on a following to raise those that surrounded him out of the darkness they were in. This event marked the beginning of human beings for the last 2,000 plus years asking the question, how is it possible that our inner thoughts, feelings, intentions, and expectations have any direct influences over the seemingly separate outside world? And as Rudolf Steiner has suggested, the reason this question is so important today is due to the recent completion of the human ego, or the I am presence. Which is to say that human beings have now become fully immersed in bodies of flesh. And now, since our physical experiences really can't become any more visceral than they already are, it becomes obvious that there is indeed a reflection formed in the outer world that arises from the internal world, however small it may seem. Tying this into how it happens from a more scientific perspective, it's pretty well known that everything in the entire universe is vibrating at its own rate. And this would mean that when we perceive something, we're really perceiving the vibrating waves that are reaching us, the perceiver. That means when we perceive something, we're perceiving waves that are reaching us from that vibrating object. This connection is formed due to the way perspective is consumed by a living organism. When the conscious entity receives external stimuli, like vision, hearing, or touch, there is a collapse of the waves, or the wave function, at that sensory organ. For example, as the information from, let's say, your eyeball is compressed in the iris, it travels along the optical nerve and then gets computed, or recombined, in the visual cortex of the brain. When this happens, there's a consumed perspective of the environment that that person is experiencing. In our reality, it's the combination of multiple points of view, or consumed perspectives, that make up the reality that we know as human beings. To show this, have you ever wondered why people with bad attitudes at parties bring down the entire room? Or have you ever wondered how when you're sitting in traffic and you feel like somebody's looking at you and you turn to look, they are? Well, the reason this happens is because of the Christ impulse. It's because as human beings, we are using each other's perspectives to create a much richer and vibrant reality. And how this happens is where we return to the Christ impulse, as it's the Christ impulse that serves as a gateway or a portal that sits inside the center of all matter in the universe. From the center of every atom in a tree, rock, animal, or any molecule, there is a spiraling out of electromagnetic force that obscures this inner light and the true essence of everything in this universe. You could say that electromagnetic waves are arising out of the tiniest point in the universe at the center of everything. Scientifically, we call this point Planck length, and it's 10 to the negative 35th meters, which is extremely small. And because there is literally nowhere else to go once you reach this extremely small point, only the purest energy and information is able to be compressed and translated from the outer world into our inner world of experience, and back into the seemingly separate outer world as our reactions. The force or thing that allows this process is the inner light, the singularity, the beacon of light, or the Christ. And it's for this reason we find that the Christ impulse is at the crucifix of all things, or at the crux. And you see now why the cross is so pivotal to the Christ impulse, because this gateway is a reference point for consciousness to find his partner here on earth, the human being. And it's from this center point that God sends and receives his love from within all things in the universe. Dan Winter has dubbed this the office of the Christ, and I believe that is an apt name for it, because it implies there is a respected seat within the organization of all matter and esoterically what we call chakras. And the impulse is just that. It is an organizing force that organizes the different energies and chakras in the body, collapsing and compressing only the purest information and energy, and acting as a relay for the back and forth of the Christ energies, the crux between world, or as we sometimes call it, the angelic realm. How is this possible, and what is this higher or angelic realm? If we remember that everything in the universe travels in waves, a good visual representation of how this works is to look at what causes an ocean to ebb and flow. As water reaches the seashore, the up and down motion of the waves, called transverse waves, begin to lose their momentum, and eventually they lose all of the up and down motion due to the friction of the sand on the beach. And this point in science is known as the point of translation, where the up and down motion gets translated into what we call longitudinal waves, which are waves that are compressed like packets within the transverse waves. So in our seashore example, this effectively means that the information of everything we see on the seashore that the waves touch before flowing back into the ocean is contained within the longitudinal waves, while the transverse waves that are continuing to roll behind it are now containing the information of the previous transverse waves reaching the shore contained within the longitudinal waves. This effectively means that the waves coming from behind have the information of the past contained within them, as all waves have the same basic function. This is what's happening inside of every single cell in our body. As each cell takes in stimuli and has an external experience, it collapses only the purest information. This information and energy gets shared collectively with the longitudinal field. While this has always been the case for all matter, at least matter we have here on Earth, it wasn't until around 2,000 years ago that humanity had developed its ego far enough to be able to internalize this process. To understand how this is so, if we look at animals that live in herds like sheep, we notice that they don't exhibit a lot of individuality. They're part of the herd. They're following each other around and doing their best not to go against the group, trying their best not to beat the black sheep. This is very similar to the tribal behavior of human beings throughout most of recorded history, believing something was normal and fine just because everyone else was doing it. And this would be fine, except for we have the power to reason and use the environment to cause more harm than is normally available to other creatures. For example, figuring out things like hitting someone with a big stick does more damage than just your hands is a perfect example of this. This is problematic because by using the environment, like the big stick, this entangles the earth in our karma. And it's for this reason that humanity has been said to be stuck in the Dark Ages for the last 11,000 years. Because it couldn't recognize the harm it has been mindlessly causing and creating through careless acts here on the earth. Or in other words, they were creating a buttload of karma. It's been through this process of understanding our impacts on the environment and the world that human earth souls have begun to address the karma that they have created throughout their lives. For even the most saintly of people, just by virtue of existing, create some karma that must be addressed. Whether it be stepping on bugs or just eating plants, our actions do directly influence the earth, and thus they impact the entire cosmos. It's through experiencing seemingly strange events happening in one's own life, like feeling someone's looking at you at a traffic light and being right, or how everyone can feel someone's bad attitude at a party, that the human ego can expand and begin to interact with the unseen but very real forces that surround and support our lives. And I hope this has been a good beginning to the understanding that the Christ is a very real force that plays a huge role in our lives. In the next video, we're going to look at what is meant by Christ being the Alpha and the Omega, how we can address our karma through the process known as the atonement, and the idea of the Pistis Christ Sophia, or wisdom and knowledge from the midst. Thank you for watching until the end, and if you've enjoyed this video, please like it and please consider subscribing, because everything helps. Thank you.